Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mixtape Podcast. My guest today is Alina Ashraf. She recently graduated from COMSATS University, Islamabad, with a bachelor's degree in Biosciences. In addition to her interest in the scientific world, she is a storyteller. Alina uses the genre of fantasy to talk about topics like bullying, racism, personal struggles, and mental health. I talked to her about her passion for writing and her first book, Soar, which is the first of a series that she is planning to write. Hello, Alina. Welcome to the podcast. Let's start with giving a bit of introduction for yourself before we get into your work and specifically the book that you have written.
I graduated last month, and basically my degree included lots of it was a very diverse degree which included stats, administration, maths. Like I covered a lot of areas, and also I included writing.
And your degree is very sounds really interesting. So, can you sort of also share how did you decide to choose these subjects? Because again, these are not really mainstream subjects that our parents or uh, we are sort of forced into doing because a hardcore professional path uh, is something that's more encouraged. So, how did you decide that these are the subjects that you wanted to pursue?
Actually, initially, the basic thing is that I was very, very much interested in sciences, especially biology. In A levels and O levels, biology was my favorite subject, and it was the subject which usually, I would say, I had the least problems with this subject. So I was not really interested in medical because, like, the pathway towards becoming a doctor, that was not really my goal. I wanted something which would be more, I would say, diverse. So I chose biosciences instead. So this degree, it is open to a lot. Like you can go to a lot of what can you say? Sorry, career wise, you can go to a lot of fields and explore a lot.
Yeah, so since you have graduated, obviously, Abhi, it's fresh and maybe you're taking a break. So, do you have any future plans? Do you know what do you, if you want to like pursue a master's degree right away, in which direction you would want to go?
I would say that I'm also on a break and I'm also exploring as well. So the future, to be very honest, considering the COVID pandemic, so it's very unclear. It's very unpredictable as well. So I can't say anything. I can't keep any promises there.
Yeah, so usually, there's I think एक generic किस्म का stereotypical perception होती है that people who are interested in sciences in general, uh, they are not really उनकी creativity का जो level होता है वो बहुत ज़्यादा high नहीं होता, which I have had the chance of, like, in addition to you, I have got to like talk to a couple of other people, some doctors and others who have been जिनका day job जो है is in the scientific field, and they have a very very sharp creative side to themselves as well. And also you have proven to be one of those people who has sort of broken this stereotype. So, so as our listeners would know, I will plug this in sort of text info in our description as well. You have written a book, which is the first book in a series that you're planning to write, and it's sort of a very interesting genre, which is not really associated with Desi writers writing in English. So before we dig into that, just share how when did you develop an interest in writing? Have you published anything before this book? And how did you decide that this is also something you want to do on the side?
I would say that I was a very avid reader, very passionate reader. I would thank my mother on this, of course, because still remember in my childhood she used to read us a lot of bedtime stories, like lots of bedtime. She used to dedicate a lot of time to us, and they were really random and very. They covered the fantasy genre, like there are children who are playing with their toys, and the toys they come alive and they're talking and all. So I would dedicate this. I would say, dedicate my writing passion towards my mom, because she was the one, I would say, who developed this. So as time went by, I started reading more and more stories. I'm a huge fan of Enid Blyton, Roald Dahl, and even J.K. Rowling. Like, their work, their creativity, it really inspired me to write something. And it was actually a really random moment when I discovered my passion of writing. I was in my late teens when I started just thinking of alternate stories. Like, there was this story I found on the internet which I was really interested in. It was related to anime actually, but I could not gain access to the whole story. And the suspense, honestly, it kind of the suspense was too much for me. So it was a very random thought, and I was like, why not I start writing this? Why not I bring up with I make an ending of to this story? And then began my thought processes and my process of writing. And then I ended up writing a very short story. And fortunately, I gained a lot of good feedback from my friends as well as family, which encouraged me to write more and more. So then I wrote very small writing samples, like being heavily inspired by Enid Blyton, Roald Dahl. I really liked his book on Matilda and his book on the Big Friendly Giant. So I was really inspired by these writers. I was like, if they have such amazing and creative imagination, then like I could try, like, obviously baby steps.
Mm.
So that's how I discovered my passion for writing. And in a year, I was like, why not write a novel? So that's where the whole process began. And it took a lot of time. I was in my A levels. I remember I was giving my A levels exams, but side by side, it helped me a lot. Writing is, I would say, a therapeutic as well for me.
That's like a very I think the authors you mentioned, I think these are they have had a huge impact, I think, globally on multiple generations. So and you have already sort of answered my next question, which was how you chose fantasy as a genre that you want to pursue, because as I mentioned earlier, uh, Desi writers writing in English are mostly known to stick to sort of a safe sort of genre of fiction or non-fiction that they write. There are only a handful of authors that I have recently discovered who are writing, of hardcore fantasy and really good fantasy. And if you're interested in exploring them, I would definitely ask you to sort of read Usman's book. He has recently released a compilation of his short stories and a couple of others. I'll share the name of their books with you on the site as well. So, talk about Soar. How did you come up with the name? And you've already shared that fantasy was something that you have always been interested in, and you have said it took a long process. So, just share how, when you started writing, did you have the plot in mind? Did you pick characters first, and what was your writing process?
Well, first of all, and yeah, I would love to read Usman's books. Like, please share the link with me. Moving on. First of all, I started drawing actually. Like, I also took arts in A levels. I drew a whole, I would say, a whole map of the fiction world that I would be creating. So after drawing, I started going into the characters. Of course, I came up with the main character, how she will be, her personality traits, and then I moved on to the other side characters. So after character making, then I moved on to the plot. The plot was very vague because obviously, like, it's a huge story which I targeted. But side by side, as I went into the paragraphs, came up with particular scenes. Like, when I was editing and describing the scenes, obviously it was a very, very messy process. Like, it took lots and lots of editing. Like, basically the writing process, first of all, you write a whole, like, it's a very, first of all, you fill pages on pages, but there is not really any kind of logic, I would say. You just keep on filling pages. After that, you start editing. So for, like, there were documents that I used to write on, like Word files I used to write on, and then there were notepads that I completely discarded at the end of the day because I was not reaching the required goal. But then obviously the writers which I really, really looked up to, like J.K. Rowling or Roald Dahl, I read their content again and again, and then I came up with my own stories, my own plot.
The process that you share, and there are a couple of quotes where writers say that the worst part for them is to sort of rewrite their own work, because there are times when, even when somebody is just writing maybe an article for a newspaper, rewriting your own work is the hardest part. So what's your take on it? Do you agree with that, or you are fine with sort of editing and rewriting your own stuff?
No, honestly, rewriting is the hardest part for a writer because, like, in my personal experience, I remember I had to cut out many scenes which I really liked, but they did not really contribute to the story. So I had to write a lot of things from scratch, even delete characters or add in new characters. So that whole process, it's honestly very, very messy. And at one point, you're just really stuck in a place and you don't know how to get out. So, like, it's just re-editing and just cutting back more content, just like keeping the audience in mind because I targeted the young audience actually.
Yeah.
So I would say it's a very, very messy and difficult process, honestly. Like I would say writing sometimes became a very love-hate relationship. Sometimes I was really happy with my work and then I literally did not even want to look at my content. So it's a very messy process. Messy
Yeah,
is the right.
I think I can at least tell you this, that you're not alone in this love-hate relationship with writing, the writing process, I would say. So this is the first book in a series. So do you have, because already, as you said, it took you a long time to write this one book. You started out when you were in A levels. So do you have any idea how many books in the series you want to put out, or is it something that sort of a fluid thing that you will just see where the storylines take you?
I would say I'm still going with the flow. I'm still thinking of the overall plot, like how will I take the story? Like there are a lot of loopholes present in the first story, which I am planning to cover, obviously, in the upcoming books that I will write. But I really want my readers to be aware of this book first so that I could obviously take their suggestions as well. Like I love those. Even with J.K. Rowling, there are a lot of fan-based theories that she really approved of. So I would really like my readers' comments and how what they think of the story. So after that, I would like to edit my the upcoming novels
Yeah,
that
so
I would.
you mentioned that the audience that you had in mind were the young adults, and the subjects that you have covered in the book, they're not very light subjects. They are very relevant subjects, and they are, I think, something that now people have started to talk about more and more, being be it bullying, be it racism, be it your self growth, mental health, and obviously all of this in the realm of technology that we live in now. So how did you decided, or how did you like thought of combining these themes and in this book specifically, and are you planning to sort of take the same themes to the next books as well, or will you be adding more relevant themes as they come? Because then, as now in COVID, obviously every generation is dealing with the isolation, the lockdowns, and all the consequences of pandemic with their own mindset. So do you plan to add these themes as well, or do you want to stick with the ones that you have picked for the first book on as well?
Well, so far I did pick mental health, which is a very, very important issue, which is uh, mental health is so important that even if you are not mentally well, then obviously you will also suffer physically. Mentally well in the sense like if you're really stressed out and you're really anxious, then you will also suffer physically as well, which a lot of people I know in my circle they have experienced. I'm also aware that when a person transitions from childhood to being young adults, like everything is very uncertain to them, and they are also encountered with high expectations, like they have to do a lot in a very small amount of time. So this obviously affects every single person on some level, like mentally. So mental health is something that I would really want to focus on in my upcoming novels as well, like it did not end here. Mental health, my own character, the main character, she had a brain injury. So she developed hallucinations. So in
Mhm.
this process, she also developed a lot of stress and anxiety as well. And her grandmother also died. So this also contributed to her hallucinations. And then she felt very isolated as well, like she felt like an alien amongst the other people. But they were very supportive and they always helped her. So this was like, I also created a very supporting group. Like the people really supported her, and like that's how I targeted mental health. When it came to racism, actually in my novel, I created a whole new species by the name of Illyrs. Illyrs are actually just like human beings, but they are actually distant relatives of human beings in the sense that Illyrs look exactly like humans, but they have wings, and that's how they make their magic. Like when it comes to wizards and witches, they use wands or fairy. I yeah, when it wizards and witches, they use wands to create magic, but when it comes to Illyrs, they use wings to make their own magic. So my main character, she's actually a human being, but she has to go into the realm of Illyrs to interact with them because a prophecy made her go to that place. So between Illyrs and humans, I showed racism in the sense that when my main character's name is Madova, her true identity was revealed, and some people were really hostile towards her. So that's how I created the concept of racism. That's how I highlighted racism. That like some people were really nice towards her, but some people, when they found out that there's a human among us, they were just very hostile. They were not, and that mentally disturbed her even more, my main character. So mental health and racism are two things which are very common even in this generation, and I think this problem will go on. So I wanted to highlight it so that people will become more and more aware of it and try to prevent any negative outcome.
It's very interesting how you've sort of overlapped these two themes of how, because many a times, I think still a lot of issues that we have, and specifically if you're talking about racism and mental health, they are sort of seen and treated in isolated segments. If somebody is talking about mental health, they will be talking about only mental health and the dynamics of mental health, but they don't really see how racism or other sort of oppressive attitudes of a society actually add to mental health. People will talk about having some health condition that leads to it, some personal loss that leads to very depression or anything else. But these larger contexts, larger issues, other issues that a society faces, how that impacts mental health, I think we have just started out to sort of explore these, and you highlighting them in your through your fiction is really, I think, on time, and it's very interesting. um so before, you already mentioned that the reason you were an avid reader was because your mother spent a lot of time reading to you guys and developing a habit. So I will just ask a very typical question that's addressed, or that's thought of as some a case with your generation and the a younger generation coming after you, is that people say, nowadays younger kids don't read books, they don't have the attention span because of all of this access to technology and social media. They don't have the mental capacity or the patience to sit down with a book. So given yourself, who is an avid reader, and obviously in your social circle, in your university, how much do you think that applies, and is there still a significant percentage of youth that is interested in in the habit of reading?
Yes, honestly, this is something which I myself have experienced. My attention span over the years, it has been reduced. Like if I'm reading a novel and I'm not really interested in it, if it's a big novel, I will stop reading it. Like I really need to be engaged, like proper, like 100%. Like if it comes to uh, novels like Harry Potter, I will be engaged in the books. But when it comes to like other kind of books, I would say like my attention span is really short. Like this is very true. Like with social media, you just want something really quick and you just want to get done with it as quick as possible. So this is very true. But I my advice would be for the upcoming generation is that the mothers and the fathers, like anyone, even older siblings, they should definitely start. Like my mom, she taught me bedtime stories. The same case should be applied onto the children of the upcoming generation. Like I have a niece, and like she is 2 years old, and at the same time, I'm just trying to get her to like books more. Like we get her small books, and then she actually shows a lot of interest. So we show her the pictures, and then we come up with stories. And this is how you like basically you just have to develop a kid's uh, psyche, and I would say personal development. It will always come through books, not the online versions. The proper like hardcover, they really help in a person's child's development.
Absolutely right. And I think it's all about developing a habit. We can't just blame the presence of technology. It's there and it's going to just increase with each passing decade or even each passing year. So, but developing your core values and habits is something that's the responsibility of people. Moving on, let's talk about publishing and your experience with it. Share with our listeners how can they access your book, where they can buy it, and um, if I am not wrong, you did a direct your contract or whatever you want to call it was directly with Amazon. Just share how did that come about? What's the process? How did you ended up putting your book out there? Because I don't think you have a publisher, and if I'm wrong, please do share if you have a publisher, local or international, who is like working with you. And if going to Amazon directly was your first choice, or was it something that you ended up doing because you didn't get a positive response with other local publications, or did you um, were not able to find a way to sort of get in touch with local publishers to get your book out there?
Well, first of all, the content of my novel, it's mostly like I situated the whole uh, my story in England. Like the whole scenario, like my characters, they live in England. So the content was more Western, I would say. So when I sent it to a local publisher, he was like, it's better if you publish it internationally, not locally. So that's how I considered Amazon, and then yeah, I have been published through a publisher. Actually, he lives in California, and his company's name is Right Age Publications. So that's how I got published. And my first aim was to be published locally in Pakistan, but then the content was more related to like it was more of a Western content. Like there's no really Desi touch in my content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but obviously you got a feedback, and obviously they have a better understanding of how the market works, because at the end of the day, publishing is in itself a business. uh, but I think it would be interesting if somebody is willing to sort of take risk and not just publish this Desiized content, because obviously we do read international content. So why not from stuff that's written by our own authors? We read Harry Potter, we read foreign authors, so why not? Anyways, so if somebody wants to buy a book in Pakistan, Amazon is the way to go about it, right?
Yes.
Okay. This was very interesting, and I would like to have you again on my podcast once you are done with book two, and we can sort of discuss it in detail, or maybe we can do a book club session as well. That is a parallel series that we do at Mixtape. But before we close off, do you want to plug in any social media accounts of yours where people can, find your work or interact if they want to, if they've sort of read your work, if they want to interact with you?
We buy my book from Amazon, but I do have a Instagram account by the name of Solitude Corner. There I post positive content, and I have also mentioned my novel.
Thank you for your time. It's very encouraging to talk to young authors from Pakistan, and so the sort of diverse content that they are engaged in and sort of writing and putting out. I think that's very interesting, and I will be looking forward to your future works as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute honor. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye bye.